when I heard my own son discussing with his wife how to remove me from their lives, like some worn-out furniture. I sat in silence, never interrupting, because in that moment, I knew the pain of betrayal would only become power if nurtured correctly, and in one night, I vanished, but not in fear. I left behind an intricate plan, ensuring those who wanted to erase me would lose everything, and I would be the one deciding who remained in this story. My name is Eleanor Drake, and at 68 years old, I thought I had seen enough of life to no longer be surprised by human nature. How wrong I was. The October afternoon was crisp and clear, the kind of day that made my wooden cabin by Lake Champlain look like something from a postcard. I had just finished calling Michael, my only son, about the spare keys I'd left for the maintenance crew coming next week. It was a brief conversation. He seemed distracted, probably busy with work as usual. "Got it. Mom, keys under the flower pot. I'll handle it," he'd said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of barely concealed impatience. "Thank you. Sweetheart, I know you're busy." "Yeah, okay, talk later." I was about to say goodbye when I heard Vanessa's voice in the background, sharp and clear. Is she finally done? My finger hovered over the end button, but something, call it mother's intuition or perhaps the strange emphasis on the word finally, made me pause. The line hadn't disconnected. Michael must have thought he'd ended the call, but I could hear everything. "She's becoming more of a burden every day," Michael said, his voice now casual, almost cheerful, so different from the clipped tone he'd used with me moments before. "But I think I've found the perfect solution." "Pine Grove Manor?" Vanessa asked. I heard the clink of glasses, the soft glug of wine being poured. "The one near Burlington. They have a memory care unit. We just need Dr. Morrison to sign off that she's showing signs of dementia." My free hand gripped the kitchen counter. Memory care unit? I had just finished reading a 1,000-page historical biography last week. I managed my own investments, maintained this property, and could still beat Michael at chess on the rare occasions he visited. "She'll fight it," Vanessa warned. "Not if we move fast. I've already talked to a lawyer about power of attorney. Once she's in, we can list the cabin. You know what waterfront property goes for these days? We're talking at least $800,000, maybe more." The room began to spin slightly. I lowered myself into a chair, still clutching the phone. "What about your Aunt Helen? Won't she ask questions?" Michael laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. But it wasn't warm. It was calculating. Helen hasn't talked to Mom in 3 years. No one will question it. We'll say Mom's been getting confused, wandering off, a few staged incidents, some concerned neighbor reports. "You've really thought this through," Vanessa said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I've been planning this for months. The cabin's worth a fortune, and she's just sitting on it like some hermit. Plus, her investment portfolio, Dad left her very comfortable. It's wasted on her." "What about Emma and Caleb? Won't they wonder why Grandma suddenly needs full-time care?" "They're teenagers. They barely look up from their phones when she visits. We'll tell them it's for her own good, that we caught her leaving the stove on, getting lost on her walks. They'll believe whatever we tell them." I heard movement, the sound of papers rustling. "I've got all the documentation ready," Michael continued. "The moment we get her diagnosed, we move, no delays, no second chances for her to lawyer up. By Thanksgiving, this will all be over." "God, I can't wait," Vanessa said. "No more pretending to care about her boring stories. No more obligatory Sunday dinners. And with that money, we can finally renovate the kitchen. Take that Europe trip." "New boat," Michael added. "Maybe a place in Florida for winters." They continued planning. My money, my home, my life, parceled out between them like items at an estate sale. I heard every word, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. But I didn't make a sound. I didn't gasp or cry or slam down the phone. I simply listened, absorbing it all, until finally, after 23 minutes. Michael noticed the call was still active. "Oh shit," he said, and the line went dead. I set the phone down gently and walked to my study. My hands were steady as I opened my journal, the leather-bound one my late husband Charles had given me for our 40th anniversary. I uncapped my fountain pen and wrote a single line. No one has the right to erase me from my own story. Then I closed the journal, walked to the window, and looked out at the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and crimson. It was beautiful. It was mine, and I would be damned if I would let them take it, or anything else, from me. But I wouldn't confront them. Oh no, that would be too simple, too expected. If they wanted to play games with my life, I would show them what 68 years of experience could do. I had just become the most dangerous thing in their world, an underestimated woman with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The next evening, I stood before my bedroom mirror, applying lipstick with the same steady hand I'd maintained through Charles's funeral, through Michael's teenage rebellions, through 40 years of teaching high school literature. Tonight required a performance, and I had always been good at those. I chose my clothes carefully, the navy dress Michael had given me 3 Christmases ago, the pearl earrings from my wedding day, nothing too formal, nothing that suggested I knew this dinner was meant to be a reconnaissance mission for my own imprisonment, just a mother, happy to spend time with her family. The drive to Michael's suburban McMansion took 35 minutes. I used every one of them to prepare, to push down the rage that threatened to bubble up. As I pulled into their circular driveway at 6:45 p.m., I saw the curtains twitch. Vanessa, watching. "Mom!" Michael opened the door with a smile so wide it looked painful. "You look wonderful. Doesn't she look wonderful, Van?" Vanessa appeared, her blonde highlights catching the foyer light. "Eleanor, so lovely to see you. Come in. Come in." They ushered me inside with the kind of excessive care usually reserved for invalids. Michael's hand hovered near my elbow as if I might topple over at any moment. I allowed it, even adding a small stumble on their Persian rug. "Oh, careful there," Michael said, his eyes lighting up. "These rugs can be tricky." "Silly me," I said, steadying myself. "I must have been distracted by how beautiful everything looks." The dining room was set for 8. I took my usual seat, then watched as a parade of strangers filled the chairs that once held family. Michael's business partner and his wife, Vanessa's yoga instructor and her husband, people who wouldn't question the narrative being constructed. "Mom, you remember Jim from the firm?" Michael said, gesturing to a man I'd never seen before. "Of course," I lied smoothly. "How nice to see you again." Throughout dinner, I cataloged every manipulation. Vanessa repeatedly asking if I needed help cutting my meat, Michael loudly reminding me of names I hadn't forgotten, the yoga instructor's husband telling a long story about his mother's journey with memory issues, while everyone nodded sympathetically in my direction. "Eleanor," Vanessa said during dessert, her voice dripping with false concern, "Michael mentioned you've been having some trouble with the cabin's paperwork. You know, updating deeds and such can be so confusing. We'd be happy to help." I let my fork pause halfway to my mouth, as if processing slowly. "Paperwork?" "The property documents," Michael jumped in. "You mentioned last month you were confused about the property taxes?" I had mentioned no such thing. Last month, I had called to tell him I'd successfully appealed the assessment and saved $2,000. But I smiled vaguely. "Did I? How thoughtful of you to remember." "That's what family's for," Vanessa said. "In fact, why don't you bring all your important papers next time? We could go through them together, make sure everything's in order." "While you're feeling up to it," Michael added, catching himself. The yoga instructor leaned forward. "My mother-in-law did the same thing with us. It's such a relief to have everything sorted while everyone can still participate in the decisions." The word "still" hung in the air like a threat. I noticed other things, too. My water glass was plastic while everyone else had crystal. My wine glass remained empty while others were refilled. "Mom's not really drinking these days," Michael explained to the table. When I excused myself to use the bathroom, Vanessa followed, hovering outside the door. "Everything all right in there, Eleanor?" "Perfect, dear," I called back, though I'd noticed they'd removed the lock from the inside of the door. The evening's crescendo came as I was leaving. Michael walked me to my car, his arm linked through mine in a parody of filial affection. "Mom, I've been thinking, maybe you shouldn't be driving at night anymore. Those country roads near the cabin can be dangerous." "I've driven those roads for 30 years. "I know, but things change. Reflexes slow down. Van and I were talking, maybe we should look into some alternatives, just to keep you safe." I turned to face him fully. This child I had carried for 9 months, nursed through pneumonia, cheered at Little League games. His eyes were calculating, already counting profits. "You're so good to worry about me," I said, patting his cheek. He flinched slightly at my touch. "I'm blessed to have such a caring son." Something flickered across his face. Guilt. No, just impatience. He wanted this over with, wanted me packaged away so he could get on with spending my money. As I drove away, I caught sight of them in my rearview mirror. Michael and Vanessa stood in their doorway, backlit and watching. Vanessa said something, and Michael nodded. They thought they were the directors of this production. They had no idea I was about to rewrite the entire script. At home, I made chamomile tea and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad. At the top, I wrote, "What they think they know." Below it, I listed every manipulation I'd witnessed, every trap they'd tried to set. On the next page, what they don't know. That list was much, much longer. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 2 a.m., but I hadn't slept. Instead, I sat surrounded by 43 years of carefully maintained financial records, property deeds, and investment portfolios. The dining table had become my war room, documents sorted into precise piles, each one a weapon they didn't know I possessed. Charles had always said I had a mind for strategy. "You could have run a Fortune 500 company, Ellie," he'd tell me. Instead, I'd chosen to teach teenagers about Shakespeare and Steinbeck, but tonight, those dormant skills awakened with fierce clarity. I started with the cabin. Michael thought it was worth $800,000. He was wrong. The recent development proposals for the lake's eastern shore had driven waterfront values well over $1 million. But more importantly, the deed wasn't as simple as he assumed. Charles and I had placed it in a living trust back in '95, with specific provisions that required multiple signatures for any sale or transfer. My laptop glowed as I logged into accounts Michael didn't know existed. The boy thought he understood his mother's finances because I'd let him help with some basic bill paying last year when I'd had my appendix out. He'd seen the checking account at Community Bank, the modest savings at Vermont Federal. Comfortable, he'd called it. He hadn't seen the investment accounts at Vanguard, the treasury bonds, the portfolio Charles and I had built through decades of careful planning. He certainly didn't know about the safety deposit box at a bank in Montreal, where I'd kept copies of everything after watching too many friends lose their life's work to greedy relatives. At 3:15 a.m., I made my first call. My niece Sarah in Seattle was a trust attorney, one of the best. The time difference meant she'd just be finishing dinner. "Aunt Eleanor, is everything all right?" "Perfect, dear. I need your professional services," discreetly. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need." By 4 a.m., we'd outlined the framework. The cabin would transfer to an irrevocable trust with Emma and Caleb as sole beneficiaries, accessible only when they turned 25. No loopholes, no amendments, no way for Michael or Vanessa to touch it. "And my other assets?" I asked. "We'll create a series of charitable remainder trusts. You'll maintain lifetime use and income, but the principal goes to your chosen charities upon, well, when the time comes. Legal, ironclad, and completely out of Michael's reach." "How quickly can we do this?" "I'll have documents drafted by Monday. We can execute everything by next Friday." After ending the call, I turned to the town property. Michael knew about the cabin, but he'd forgotten about the small apartment building I'd inherited from my mother. 4 units, fully rented, generating steady income. That would go into a separate LLC, with a management company handling everything. Michael wouldn't even know where to look for it. The sun was rising as I made my final lists: bank accounts to move, passwords to change, documents to secure, but also smaller things. The photo albums he'd want to sell as vintage, Charles's watch collection, my grandmother's jewelry. Everything had to be protected or placed beyond reach. I showered, dressed in my gardening clothes, and made coffee. Normal routine. Normal morning, except for the locksmith coming at 10 a.m. The bank appointments scheduled throughout the day, the storage unit I'd rented across town under my maiden name. As I ate breakfast, I opened my journal again and wrote, "They gave me a gift with their greed. They showed me exactly who they are. Michael isn't struggling with a difficult decision about an aging parent. He's a predator who sees me as prey. Vanessa isn't a concerned daughter-in-law. She's a co-conspirator counting my money. They've planned for months, imagining me helpless, imagining me weak. They never considered that I might be planning too." The phone rang at 8:30 a.m. Michael. "Mom, just checking in? How are you feeling this morning?" "Wonderful, sweetheart. I'm about to work in the garden. Maybe I should come by. Help you out? Those tools can be heavy." "How thoughtful. But I'm quite capable. Besides, didn't you mention a golf game on Saturdays?" A pause. "You remembered that?" I smiled. A mother remembers everything about her children. Michael. Everything. "Right. Well, be careful out there. Maybe we should talk about getting you some help around the property. Someone to check in on you." "We'll see," I said vaguely. "Enjoy your golf." After hanging up, I looked around my kitchen. My beautiful, sun-filled kitchen in my mortgage-free home on my pristine land. They wanted to take it all, lock me away, and divide the spoils. They wanted to erase Eleanor Drake, beloved teacher, devoted mother, keeper of memories, and builder of dreams. But Eleanor Drake wasn't going anywhere, at least, not in the way they expected. The locksmith arrived precisely at 10. By noon, every lock was changed, security cameras installed, and a safe bolted into the bedroom closet floor. I paid cash, gave a false name, and watched him drive away. Then I sat back down at my war room table and began Phase 2. If they wanted to play games with my life, I'd show them what a 68-year-old English teacher could do when she decided to rewrite the story. And this time, I was writing them out of it entirely. The name change was simpler than most people realized. At the courthouse in Montpelier, I filed the paperwork as Eleanor Drake, but I would leave as Nora Whitfield, my grandmother's maiden name, a connection to the past that Michael had never bothered to learn. The clerk barely looked up as she stamped the documents. "Processing takes about 2 weeks," and she said. "Perfect timing," I replied. Over the next 10 days, I became a ghost in my own life. The cabin was emptied systematically, not of furniture, which would raise suspicions, but of everything that mattered. Photo albums went into climate-controlled storage, Charles's first edition books, my mother's china, the quilts my grandmother had stitched, all carefully packed and moved to a facility 2 states away, paid for 5 years in advance under my new name. I sold the apartment building to a property group in Boston, structuring the deal through Sarah's firm so Michael's name appeared nowhere in the paperwork. The proceeds went into a trust for Emma and Caleb's education, untouchable until they turned 18. My neighbor Ruth stopped by one afternoon, finding me packing a suitcase. "Taking a trip, Eleanor?" "Visiting an old college friend in Arizona." I lied smoothly. "Just for a few weeks." "Good for you. That Michael of yours worries too much, saying you shouldn't travel alone." So he was already spreading his narrative. I smiled. Michael's always been protective. The Greyhound station at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday was nearly empty. I'd chosen it deliberately. No cameras worth noting, no records worth keeping. I paid cash for a ticket to Albuquerque, my 2 suitcases containing everything I needed to start over. My car was parked in the long-term lot at the airport, a false trail suggesting I'd flown somewhere. The bus ride took 3 days with transfers. I used the time to shed Eleanor Drake completely. In Chicago, I bought different clothes, jeans and cotton shirts instead of my usual slacks and cardigans. In Kansas City, I had my hair cut short and stopped wearing the reading glasses I'd hidden behind for years. By the time I reached New Mexico, the woman in the reflection was a stranger. Nora Whitfield, younger looking, sharper, unburdened. The cottage I rented in Las Cruces was small but perfect adobe walls, a garden space, mountain views. The landlord, a kind woman named Maria, didn't ask questions beyond verifying I could pay 6 months in advance. "Fresh start," she said, recognizing something in my eyes. "Something like that. Good for you. We all deserve a second act." I established routines quickly. Morning swims at the community center, volunteer shifts at the Literacy Council, evenings learning to throw pottery at the local arts co-op. I introduced myself as Nora, a retired teacher from the Midwest, no family to speak of. It wasn't entirely a lie. 3 weeks into my new life, I made my most important purchases, 2 prepaid phones from different carriers, paid with cash at separate stores. These I packaged carefully with handwritten notes. "My darling Emma, your grandmother loves you more than words can say. This phone is our secret garden where we can talk without the weeds listening. Text me when you're alone. The sunrise is beautiful today. All my love, Grandma." Dearest Caleb, you once asked me why I love mysteries so much. Here's our own. A phone that's just for us. When you can, send me. The game is on. Your grandmother loves you beyond measure. I mailed them to their schools, not their home, marked personal and confidential. Then I waited. Emma texted first. 2 days later, "The sunrise is beautiful today. Grandma, where are you? Mom and Dad are acting weird." "I'm safe and happy. Sweetheart, sometimes adults need space to figure things out. Tell me about your violin recital." Caleb's message came that evening. "The game is on. Dad says you're sick. You don't sound sick." Sick of being underestimated. Perhaps, how's basketball going? Slowly, carefully, I rebuilt relationships with my grandchildren outside of Michael's control. They told me about their lives. Emma's anxiety about college applications, Caleb's first girlfriend. I shared wisdom, jokes, and love, but never my location, never the full truth. They were too young to carry that burden. Meanwhile, I monitored the situation from afar. Michael had filed a missing person report, but without evidence of foul play or mental incompetence. The police did little. Vanessa started a Facebook page, Finding Eleanor Drake, full of staged concern and old photos where I looked particularly frail. I watched it all from the public library computers, careful to use different locations each time. Their frustration was palpable. Without me to declare incompetent, they couldn't touch the cabin. Without my signature, they couldn't access anything. Their elaborate plan had collapsed because the central piece had simply refused to play. One afternoon, while shaping clay on the pottery wheel, I thought about transformation, how heat and pressure could turn soft earth into something permanent, useful, beautiful. My hands, steady and sure, guided the clay as it spun. "That's lovely," said the instructor, watching my bowl take shape. "You've done this before." "No," I said truthfully, "but I'm learning that it's never too late to become someone new." She smiled. "Isn't that the truth?" As the desert sun set that evening, painting the mountains purple and gold, I sat on my small patio with a cup of tea, somewhere in Vermont. Michael was probably pacing his expensive floors, wondering how his foolproof plan had evaporated. Vanessa was likely recalculating, trying to figure out where the money had gone. But here, in the high desert, Nora Whitfield was at peace. She had a library card, a volunteer schedule, and 2 phones that connected her to the only family that truly mattered. Eleanor Drake had vanished, but she hadn't disappeared. She had simply rewritten herself. 6 months into my new life, I maintained my information network like a spider monitoring her web. The public library in Las Cruces became my command center. Different branches on different days, always paying cash for computer time, always clearing the browser history. What I found alternately amused and infuriated me. Michael's first mistake was trying to use the cabin as collateral for a business loan. The bank had called the trust company, which had referred them to Sarah's firm, which had politely informed them that Mr. Drake had no legal claim to the property. I could imagine his face when he received that news. His second mistake was underestimating Vanessa's appetite for drama. Her Finding Eleanor Drake page had evolved into something else entirely, a platform for her to position herself as the long-suffering daughter-in-law, abandoned by a selfish mother-in-law who'd probably run off with some man from the internet. The comments were split between sympathy and skepticism, especially when she started adding donation links to help with search efforts. "Mom's being super weird," Emma texted one evening. "She's doing these Facebook Live videos crying about Grandma, but she never even liked you? People show their true colors in difficult times." I replied, "What matters is that you know I'm safe and I love you." "I know, but why won't you tell us where you are?" "Because sometimes, my darling, the best way to protect the people you love is to protect yourself first." Caleb's updates were more practical. "Dad tried to get into your safety deposit box at Community Bank. They wouldn't let him. He was really mad. Good thing I moved everything important long ago." I typed back, "How's your history project coming?" From my desert sanctuary, I watched their lives unravel in slow motion. Without the cabin to leverage, Michael's grand business plans stalled. The renovation company he'd started with borrowed money, began hemorrhaging funds. Vanessa's Instagram lifestyle, all those designer bags and spa days she'd planned to fund with my money, became increasingly difficult to maintain. But I wasn't passive in my observation. Through Sarah, I kept the pressure steady. When Michael tried to have me declared legally dead after just 6 months, Sarah's firm responded with proof of life documents signed by Nora Whitfield, witnessed and notarized, without revealing the connection. When he attempted to contest the trust provisions, he found himself facing lawyers who billed more per hour than he made in a day. "Your nephew's getting desperate," Sarah told me during one of our scheduled calls from a burner phone. "He's hired a private investigator. Let him. They're looking for Eleanor Drake. She doesn't exist anymore." One afternoon at the Literacy Center, I was teaching a young mother to read when she said something that stopped me cold. "My ex tried to take everything when I left, but my grandmother told me, when someone shows you they don't see you as human, believe them." "Your grandmother was wise," I said. "She saved my life, taught me that disappearing isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do." I thought about that conversation as I walked home through the desert evening. The truth was, I'd never felt more visible than I did as Invisible Nora. Without the weight of being Michael's mother, Vanessa's burden, Eleanor Drake the widow with money, I could simply be. I made friends who knew nothing of my past. I learned to make enchiladas from Maria. I joined a book club where we debated contemporary fiction instead of estate planning. The real test came 8 months after my disappearance. Vanessa posted a tearful video announcing their marriage was ending. "The stress of losing Michael's mother has torn us apart," she sobbed to the camera. "I'll be staying with my sister while we figure things out." Emma texted within minutes. "Mom's leaving Dad. She says it's because of you disappearing, but I heard them fighting about money." "I'm sorry you're going through this, sweetheart." "I'm not. They've been awful to each other since you left. Dad keeps saying if you'd just done what you were supposed to. What were you supposed to do? Grandma?" "Disappear," I wrote back. "Just not the way they planned." Michael's downfall accelerated after Vanessa left, without her social media savvy. His victim narrative fell apart. The private investigator found nothing. The lawyer's bills mounted. His business failed. And through it all, the cabin sat empty on the lake, protected by legal structures he couldn't break, waiting for 2 grandchildren who would someday understand its value. Late at night, I sometimes pulled up property listings in Vermont, looking at what they thought they'd steal from me. The development around the lake had indeed driven prices up. My little cabin, purchased for $40,000 in 1980, was now worth $1.3 million, but its real value couldn't be measured in dollars. It was in the summers Emma and Caleb would spend there, the memories they'd make, the roots they'd establish. I'd kept them from stealing my assets, but more importantly, I'd kept them from stealing my story. They'd written a script where I was the confused old woman shuffled off to die. Instead, I'd written my own ending, one where Eleanor Drake vanished but Nora Whitfield thrived, where a grandmother's love transcended distance, where a woman's worth wasn't measured by what others could take from her. From my patio, I watched the stars emerge in the clear desert sky, somewhere beneath these same stars. Michael was learning what happened when you tried to erase someone who refused to be erased, and I was learning that sometimes the best revenge isn't confrontation or dramatic revelations. Sometimes it's simply living well, beyond their reach, on your own terms. The game was far from over, but I was winning. The letter arrived through Sarah's firm exactly 1 year after my disappearance. I read it in her office via secure video call, watching her hold up each page to the camera. The language was formal, but the message was clear. A final warning shot wrapped in legal terminology. To Mrs. Eleanor Drake, wherever she may be. Sarah read aloud. This communication serves as official notice regarding the trust provisions established for the benefit of Emma and Caleb Drake. The details were precise, surgical. Michael would receive a modest monthly stipend from a separate fund enough to prevent destitution. Not enough for comfort. It would continue only as long as he met specific conditions. No attempts to contest the trusts. No interference with the grandchildren's inheritance. No public statements about my whereabouts or mental state. Additionally, Sarah continued, any attempt to locate, contact, or harass the grantor will result in immediate termination of all benefits and potential legal action. He'll hate it, I said. He'll take it, Sarah countered. His credit's destroyed, the divorce cleaned him out, and this is his only steady income now. I made sure he understands that. But the letter's true power lay in its final paragraphs. The education trusts for Emma and Caleb had been expanded. Full tuition for any university they chose, living expenses, study abroad programs. Everything Michael had planned to steal from me would now flow directly to them, bypassing him entirely. There's one more thing, Sarah said, her expression shifting. Vanessa's been making noise about grandparents' rights, trying to get custody of the kids since Michael's struggling. She's positioning herself as the stable parent. I felt my jaw tighten. Over my dead body. That's why we're adding this. She held up another document, a provision that if either parent attempts to restrict the children's inheritance or use it as leverage for custody, a separate legal fund activates to ensure the kids have independent representation. The children aren't pawns, I said. No, they're not. And now they have a guardian angel with very sharp legal teeth. 3 days after the letter was delivered, my phone buzzed. Emma. Dad got some legal papers. He locked himself in his office and we could hear him throwing things. Mom's here picking us up and she's acting weird too. Are you and Caleb safe? Yeah, just confused. Mom keeps saying we need to be a family now, but she's also asking lots of questions about you. Did you do something? I protected what matters most. You and your brother. Protect us from what? I paused, choosing my words carefully. From decisions adults sometimes make when they forget that children aren't possessions. That evening, Caleb called, actually called, his voice cracking with adolescent emotion. Grandma, I don't understand what's happening. Dad says you abandoned us. Mom says you're being selfish, but you're the only one who actually talks to us like we're real people. You are real people who deserve to have their futures protected. Is that why you left, to protect us? Sometimes, my dear boy, the best way to stay in someone's life is to leave it on your own terms. That sounds like something from one of those mystery novels you love. I smiled. Life's the greatest mystery of all, and you're learning to solve it. The immediate aftermath was predictable. Michael raged against the conditions but signed the acceptance papers within a week, his need for money overcoming his pride. Vanessa's custody grab failed when the court discovered she'd been siphoning money from the Facebook fundraiser into personal accounts. Both children remained with Michael, but with court-appointed oversight and regular check-ins from a social worker. Through it all, I maintained my distance and my new identity. Nora Whitfield had developed her own life friends who knew her as a retired teacher with a mysterious past, a reputation at the Literacy Center for patience with struggling readers. Even a gentleman friend named Robert who shared my love of desert hiking and asked no uncomfortable questions. "You remind me of my late wife," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from a trail overlook. She had secrets too, said they kept her interesting. Wise woman. The wisest, she taught me that everyone deserves their mysteries. 6 weeks after the letter, I received a package at my post office box. No return address, but I recognized Emma's handwriting. Inside were 2 items: a photo from her phone of the sunrise over Lake Champlain, taken from the cabin's deck, and a handwritten note. "Dad brought us here to check on things. He didn't know we knew about the trust. We didn't tell him. The sunrise is still beautiful. Grandma, we'll keep it safe for you." I framed the photo and hung it in my bedroom, a reminder of what I'd preserved. Not just property or money, but possibility. The possibility that 2 teenagers could grow up knowing they were valued for more than their potential inheritance. The possibility that a grandmother's love could transcend physical distance. The possibility that sometimes vanishing was the most visible thing you could do. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, "They wanted me to disappear quietly. Conveniently, profitably, instead, I disappeared loudly, in legal documents and trust funds, in protected futures and broken schemes. I may be invisible, but my presence has never been more felt. Let them rage against shadows while I live in the light." The war was won, but battles remained. I stayed ready, stayed watching, stayed gone. Because Eleanor Drake had one more lesson to teach, that a woman who owns her own disappearance can never truly be erased. The phone call from Sarah came at 11:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, 18 months after my disappearance. I was reading in bed, a cup of chamomile cooling on my nightstand, when the burner phone buzzed with our emergency pattern. 3 calls. "Hang up. Call again." "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Michael's trying to pull something." I set down my book, fully alert. "Tell me." "He's found a new business partner. They're putting together a real estate development deal, and he's listed you as a silent partner with significant assets. He's forged your signature on preliminary documents. He's using my name as collateral for loans? Worse, he's created a paper trail suggesting you're alive and actively investing. If this goes through, when it inevitably fails, and it will fail, the man couldn't run a lemonade stand. Creditors will come after you, the real you." I stood, pacing my small bedroom. Outside, the desert wind rattled the windows. How far has it gone? Far enough. The closing is set for Monday. $5 million in projected development, with Eleanor Drake listed as guaranteeing $2 million of it. 4 days? I sat at my desk, pulling out a legal pad. "What do you need from me?" "Proof that you had no involvement, notarized statements, documentation showing you couldn't have signed those papers. But here's the catch. We need to do it without revealing where you are or that you're Nora Whitfield." I thought for a moment, then smiled. "No, we don't." "Aunt Eleanor." We let him hang himself, Sarah, but first, we make sure he's holding the rope alone." Over the next 72 hours, I orchestrated the most complex performance of my life. Through Sarah, I had a forensic document examiner review the forged signatures. The report was damning. Not only were they forgeries, but they were sloppy ones. Michael had practiced my signature from old birthday cards, not realizing I'd changed it slightly after Charles died. Meanwhile, I had Sarah compile evidence of my established patterns. The Literacy Center in Las Cruces had security footage of me teaching during the exact times Michael claimed I was in meetings in Vermont. My friend Robert, who turned out to have a background in law enforcement, provided witness statements about our regular hiking schedule. But the masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Emma, now 17 and sharp as a blade, had been keeping her own records. "Grandma," she texted Saturday morning. "I overheard Dad on a call. Is he trying to use your name for something?" "Yes, sweetheart, but don't worry." "I'm not worried. I'm angry. And I have recordings." My brilliant granddaughter had been documenting her father's behavior for months, initially out of concern for her and Caleb's safety during the custody battles. Her phone contained voice memos of Michael discussing the forged documents, laughing about how the old bat's signature is easy to fake and how she's probably dead anyway. Who's going to check? "Send them to this number," I told her, providing Sarah's secure line. "And Emma, I'm proud of you." "I learned from the best. Grandma, sometimes you have to protect yourself first." Sunday evening, as Michael prepared for his Monday triumph, Sarah executed our plan. She contacted the development company directly, not as Michael's aunt, but as the attorney for a trust with significant interests in preserving Eleanor Drake's estate integrity. She presented the forensic evidence, the alibis, and, devastatingly, Emma's recordings. By 9 a.m. Monday, Michael arrived at the closing to find not his business partners, but federal investigators, wire fraud across state lines, forgery, identity theft. The very real Eleanor Drake might be missing, but impersonating her for financial gain was still very much a crime. I watched the news coverage from a coffee shop in Las Cruces, my laptop open to a Burlington news site. They'd used his company headshot, the one where he looked successful, confident, untouchable. The headline read, "Local developer arrested in elaborate forgery scheme." My phone buzzed. "Caleb, Dad's been arrested. Mom's here freaking out. Emma's just sitting there smiling. Is this what you meant by protecting us?" "Part of it," I replied. "The rest comes next." And indeed, the rest followed swiftly. With Michael facing federal charges, the court revisited the custody arrangement. Vanessa, tainted by her fundraising fraud, was deemed unfit. The children's court-appointed advocate recommended something unprecedented: emancipation for Emma, who was nearly 18, with her as guardian for Caleb until his 16th birthday. The trust Sarah had established activated its provisions. The cabin on Lake Champlain would be maintained by a property management company until Emma turned 25. The education funds flowed freely, and a new provision kicked in: a living stipend for both children, ensuring they could live independently from both parents. "You gave us our freedom," Emma said during our next call, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave us choices." "No, my darling, you always had choices. I just made sure no one could take them away." The publicity from Michael's arrest briefly renewed interest in my disappearance, but it quickly shifted to the scandal of a son defrauding his missing mother. Vanessa tried to capitalize with more videos, but public sympathy had turned. Comment sections filled with outrage on my behalf. "No wonder she disappeared," became a common refrain. From my desert refuge, I felt no satisfaction in Michael's downfall, only a quiet vindication. He'd wanted to erase me, to reduce me to a signature on documents, a means to his ends. Instead, he discovered that Eleanor Drake, present or absent, was more than he'd ever understood. As news of his legal troubles dominated the local headlines, I returned to my simple life. Nora Whitfield had a literacy class to teach, a hiking date with Robert, a pottery bowl to glaze. Eleanor Drake existed now only in legal documents and the hearts of 2 grandchildren who understood that sometimes love meant letting go, and sometimes it meant holding on with every weapon at your disposal. That evening, as I shaped clay on the wheel, I thought about transformation again. Michael had tried to transform me into nothing. Instead, I'd transform myself into everything: a ghost who protected, a memory who provided, an absence more powerful than any presence could have been. The clay spun beneath my hands, taking shape, becoming something beautiful and useful and entirely its own, just like Nora Whitfield, who had risen from Eleanor Drake's carefully orchestrated ashes, 2 years after my disappearance. I stood in my New Mexico garden at 6 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. My phone, the regular one now, not the burner chimed with a message. Emma had sent a photo, her college acceptance letter to Dartmouth, full scholarship from the trust fund, with a note, following in your footsteps, Grandma, English literature major. An hour later, Caleb texted from the cabin, spent the night here after basketball camp, watched the sunrise from your dock, the lake remembers you. I smiled, sipping my coffee. They were safe, funded, free. Everything I'd fought for had come to pass. Michael's trial had ended 6 months ago. 3 years federal prison, minimum security. The local papers had covered it extensively, how the prominent developer had forged his missing mother's signature for million-dollar deals while she was presumed dead or incapacitated. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He'd tried to have me declared incompetent only to prove his own spectacular incompetence. Vanessa had reinvented herself again, moving to California to become a life coach for women overcoming toxic relationships. Her social media tagline read, "I survived a narcissist and his controlling mother." I occasionally checked her posts from the library computers, amused by her revisionist history. She'd blocked Emma and Caleb after they refused to participate in her victim narrative. "Some people need their stories," Robert said one evening as we watched the sunset from our favorite trail. He knew my history now, not the details, but the shape of it, even if they're fiction. "All stories are fiction to some degree," I replied. "We choose which parts to emphasize, which characters deserve redemption, and which ones get written out entirely." "Those two?" The trust Sarah had created was a masterwork of legal architecture. The cabin remained protected, maintained, waiting. The investment accounts grew steadily, earmarked for educations and futures. But the true masterpiece was the scholarship fund I'd established at my old high school in Vermont, the Eleanor Drake Memorial Fund, for students who showed promise in literature and creative writing. "Memorial?" Sarah had questioned when I'd proposed it. "Let Eleanor rest in peace," I'd said. "She served her purpose." The fund's first recipient had been announced last month, a young woman from a difficult family situation who wrote poetry about survival and transformation. Her acceptance speech thanked the mysterious benefactor who understood that sometimes disappearing was the only way to truly appear. I thought about that as I tended my garden, hands deep in desert soil. Nora Whitfield had built a life worth living. She had friends who knew her present, not her past. She had Robert, who brought her coffee in the mornings and never asked why she sometimes stared east with distant eyes. She had purpose in her teaching, joy in her pottery, peace in her solitude. But most importantly, she had won. Not the petty victory of revenge. Watching Michael's mugshot in the papers had brought no joy, only a sense of waste, not the hollow triumph of Vanessa's social media implosion. The real victory was simpler and more profound. She had refused to be erased. My phone rang, a video call from Emma. I accepted. Seeing her face appear on screen, Caleb beside her, they were at the cabin. Morning light streaming through the windows I'd watched Charles install 30 years ago. "Hi, Grandma," Emma said. "We have something to tell you." "We've been talking," Caleb added, his voice deeper now at 16, "about the future." "We want you to know," Emma continued, "that when I turn 25 and get the cabin, our first act will be to install a plaque, Eleanor's Haven, because you gave us a haven when we needed it most. And," Caleb grinned, "we're going to add a guest house, very small, very private, just in case a certain retired teacher from New Mexico ever wants to visit, anonymously, of course." I felt tears prick my eyes. "That's lovely, my darlings." "You taught us something important," Emma said, "that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go, and sometimes it's knowing how to hold on differently." After we ended the call, I sat in my garden as the morning warmed. 2 years ago, I'd heard my son planning to delete me from existence. Today, I existed more fully than ever, in trust funds and scholarships, in protected futures and preserved possibilities, in 2 grandchildren who understood that strength sometimes wore the disguise of absence. I opened my journal, a new one, leather-bound like the old, a gift from Robert who understood the importance of recording stories. At the top of the fresh page, I wrote, "They say you can't take it with you. They're wrong. You can take everything that matters. Love, dignity, the power to choose your own ending." Eleanor Drake vanished, but she took her story with her. And in the end, that's all any of us can do, refuse to let others write our final chapters. I closed the journal and stood, brushing soil from my hands, inside. Robert was making breakfast, his famous green chili eggs. This afternoon, I had 3 students at the literacy center. This evening, pottery class, this life, built from conscious choice rather than obligation. Eleanor Drake was gone, but Nora Whitfield, she was just beginning. And somewhere in Vermont, a lake waited beside an empty cabin, holding its secrets, keeping its promises, until the next generation came to claim their inheritance, not just of property, but of the knowledge that sometimes the best way to save your life is to disappear from it entirely. The sunrise was beautiful today, and tomorrow it would be beautiful again. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across distances, just like Eleanor did. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Eleanor's situation? Your perspectives make these stories richer for everyone.